What's up, Zach here, and no, that title is not clickbait. The Saucony Hurricane 24 has by far been the most comfortable shoe I've had on my foot this year. Is it the best running shoe, right, for performance, just overall? That remains to be seen. So let's get into them. And thanks to Saucony for sending me a pair of these over to check out. However, as always, this video is by no means sponsored, and all opinions, good, bad, and indifferent, are all my own. Now, starting off in the uppers, this is, I think, one of the biggest parts of why they're so comfortable. Some companies can thread the needle of a very thin, yet very plush feeling uppers. Others tend to feel stiff or paper mache or just really non-containing, just feel like kind of like a loose bag of bones up there. The Hurricane 24s really do thread that needle very well. Number one, the lace line actually locks down pretty darn well, especially for a shoe that, is like I said, is more of a thin, more minimal upper setup. It does have integrated as well as external outrigger lace eyelets. The one thing I don't like, though, is that there's no gusset on the tongue. It is only attached at the distal tip. It does have an eyelet that the laces can lock it through, so it doesn't move too much, but a gusset probably would have added a little bit more lockdown to this. As you go into the heel counter, there's a decent amount of padding, not a crazy amount of padding. However, you do sit pretty low under the EVA foam. That's the carrier around this, which we'll talk about in the midsole teardown. So you actually sit pretty decent in the shoes. I noticed that without the runner's knot, the heel slippage is moderate. With the runner's knot, it is mild. I will say for the runner's knot, because the tongue is a little bit thin, if you're a very high arched foot, you'll probably have to break the shoe in a little bit before that becomes a little bit more comfortable. Now, moving into the forefoot, this is a very thin layer of padding. It's that woven mesh. You can see that combination of textile TPU meshing, just, super thin, but does feel incredibly buttery underfoot. And with that super light upper comes a ton of breathability. On the breathability test on these things, only heated up 100.4 degrees. And then the breathability mapping, you can really see kind of the tail of the tape. Fog is blowing out of everywhere, even though underneath of it, it looks like this is pretty solid backing. You can see on the microscope, it's not. There are definitely pores that fog can get through, and it gets through it immediately. So in terms of heat and moisture management, these things are some of the best out there. Now, if you look at this thing on the upper durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, I actually did take this through some brush. As you can see, I've been wearing these things quite a bit. I actually didn't want to do this review because I only got one pair of these and I just really wanted to use them a lot. And I took them through a lot. And honestly, I mean, the burr does not get through the entire layer of uppers. There is an underlayer drag guard underneath of this, or, a protector underneath of it. So the shoe might look a little bit weird, but they are really meant for, road running, road walking. So honestly, in terms of their containment, for how thin they are, I think they do an outsized job. And for blunt trauma, especially underneath of that, if you've got toenails that are rubbing against this or something like that, because there is that internal drag guard, they should be just fine. But getting in the midsole teardown, it's not super stiff PEBA like you've seen in some shoes. The strobe board is incredibly comfortable. And then I know I don't talk about insoles a lot, but this is an incredibly thick, really dense ortholite removable insole. This thing is probably going to last a decent amount of time. This thing is molded, so most of the components of the shoe are meant for, pure comfort. If you take out this removable insole, honestly, it still feels just as plush. Now, it does say this has a power run frame around it. What that is just it's an EVA carrier that goes around the outside of the shoe. That's what is walling you into the heel counter as well. That's what comes up over most of your foot. That provides a lot of stability feeling of this shoe. Now we get to the fit section and shape of the shoe. We'll kind of see how they got away with having such a huge frame on it without it feeling super bulky and clunky. Now this shoe does have no shank. However, it is incredibly wide in the midfoot, so it does disperse weight incredibly well. And it's more of kind of like a daily trainer. It's more of kind of like that walk, run, plus jog shoe. So it's kind of in the category that these are going. Kind of like the New Balance Rebel V4, we just get the much wider base. That's kind of how they're creating stability there. Now, if you look at this thing on the bounce height test, 39 centimeters in the rear foot, 43 in the forefoot. We're used to seeing that with PEBA-based foams. And in this one, because it is just so plush and comfortable, but also has some pretty decent bounce to it, like I said, once again, just kind of threading that needle between performance and kind of pop, but also a lot of plush comfort. And getting into the outsole tread, you've got an enormous rear foot striking landing pad here in the rear foot. As you can see, I've made use of this. And then as you kind of go up into the forefoot, you do have a little bit of break in the tread here in the midfoot, but then in the forefoot, almost like connected triangular patterns, a little bit of gridding on there. Like I said, it is incredibly wide in terms of the tread on these things. So once again, in terms of stability, these things do incredibly well. Look at these things on the outsole durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper. I mean, millimeter of damage on these. The durometer comes in at 14.5. So, it's decently hard rubber. It should be durable enough as long as you're not, as long as you don't shear a ton when you walk or when you run. Look at these things on the speed ratio, coming in at a 3.68. Most of that has to do with the decreased weight of the shoe plus all that Pebex. And while they're new, yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. To me, they're not rocket ship type shoes, right? They're not moon shoes. They don't have like a crazy amount of launch into them, right? They're not the Vaporflies or the Alphaflies. But what they do have is just easy kind of, very nice tempo type speed, right? It's pretty easy to keep pace in these things. And because they do feel like an extension of your leg because the uppers really kind of envelop it, but they're super light, kind of they match the profile of the midsole. And there is just such a chunk of foam in that midsole. Like I said, they just do have very easy pace to them. As they get older, right over 3-4 months, is that going to start to wear down? Probably, yeah, because there's really nothing stress shielding that unless you have an orthotic in there. That's going to help a lot. So I'd say with an orthotic, you can probably expect that speed to, retain, right, that profile to retain. Without it, if you want just that super plush feeling, expect these to get a little bit more dull kind of over those months. But in terms of the fit and more importantly, shape of the Hurricane 24, it's pretty interesting. Number one has an 8-degree inflare, but that's the forefoot. These things also have a 9-degree rear foot inflare from the midfoot of the shoe. That's why also they feel like they're not super clunky, even though you look at this shoe, it's really super wide in the midfoot. Like I said, these are just, they do not wobble, right? They're incredibly stable shoes, like I said, for not having a shank. And the way they can get away with it not feeling like a clunker is, right, having a rear foot inflare. That also means that, once again, any running shoe, right, should not be playing tennis or pickleball or trying to shoot hoops in these. Yes, I know some people will say, well, I haven't had an accident yet. I haven't rolled my ankle yet. Yet is like the worst word in the English dictionary. It will happen to the majority of people at some point. So while for walking, running, anything like that, just, casual, yeah, it's fine, but don't expect it to be side-to-side stable like a tennis shoe, like a pickleball shoe, like a basketball shoe. I get that question a lot in these reviews, especially for these really super plush and comfortable running shoes. Now, also, these things have a 28.7 centimeter length, 10.3 centimeter metatarsal width, 11.3 centimeter digital width, and a taper of 29 degrees. These things are incredibly forgiving in the midfoot as well as getting into the forefoot, even though they have a pretty standard taper. They're just so wide, it doesn't really matter, plus the uppers are so forgiving. I'd say if you're a narrow foot, I'd definitely be going down a half size on these. If you're a very short, narrow foot, you'd probably go down one size in these things just to get that reduction. Even a medium foot, if you want more of a glove-like fit, you're not super long, you can go down a half size otherwise. If you just want the comfort, more plush feeling in them, especially if they're more casual, go true to size, a 2E and 4E, I'd just be going true to size on these. They're just so forgiving. Zero break-in in them whatsoever. I think the bigger issue would be, like I said, the shorter, narrow feet. Now, in terms of the snake-bitten foot, while they're new, they're pretty fantastic for most things, right? That Peba is going to hold the shoe up pretty well. It's going to stay pretty resilient, and it does have a carrier on it, so it's not going to want to pop out the rails of the shoe. I would say as the shoe gets older, that's where you're going to start to, kind of get into those issues. I would say if you want the protection plus the comfort, throw a low profile orthotic in here, even something like a Power Step bridge in these things, just something to give a little bit more structure to the midsole over time. I think that's fine. Obviously you can throw something like a Pulse or a Pinnacle in there, that's fine too, but just something, right, just to bridge that gap. In terms of heel pain, tendinitis, things like that, anything that, that has, a micro motion component to it, I do think an orthotic, you probably should have in these things. For casual walking, I think they're just okay right on their own, but if you're somebody with more of those snake bites coming into them, like I said, throw an orthotic in them, they should be just fine. But in terms of the runnability of the Hurricanes, one of the best runners for these, I did notice rear foot and midfoot striking in these was very, very easy because they have such a flat midfoot to them. Like you have a little bit of a rise in the rear foot and in the forefoot. Midfoot strikers to me is really where they kind of own the road, I guess you should say. Forefoot strikers, I think they're good for, they're okay for. I did notice that the shoe did feel pretty soft and flexible when I was forefoot striking. Some people are gonna absolutely love that feeling because you just kind of, like I said, it is a very plush feeling when your metatarsal heads come down. It's definitely not a springy forefoot strike. In some shoes, you can kind of feel you come down on your forefoot and it almost feels like there's a little bit of a kick to them. These ones, much more, it feels more like a memory foam mattress, right? A memory foam pillow coming into them. So, like I said, not bad for forefoot strikers, and people that like that profile are gonna love it. Midfoot and rear foot strikers, though, definitely that's where these things impart a lot of stability, especially because of the rear foot inflare. For a rear foot striker, it's gonna be a lot more forgiving, especially on your tibia if you're trying to prevent shin splints, things like that. So I think that's kind of where these go. Like I said, to me, they're not rocket ships, but they are definitely a incredibly comfortable, number one, walking shoe, just, recreational, jogging, running shoe, or just for kind of like a daily type trainer, right? You're not really doing anything too serious in them. They're nice to have in your arsenal for a pretty plush, comfortable ride. Just, like I said, like the New Balance Rebel V4, I kind of feel like these two shoes are pretty similar. The Hurricane 24, a little bit more comfortable in the uppers, maybe just a little bit more pop out of that midsole. But like I said, just for everyday kind of, just, hey, I'm gonna go out for a run, or like me, going on the trail with my kid, walking to go get ice cream. There has not been a shoe close yet this year that has been as comfortable in these. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, especially if you're grabbing these for more casual wear, especially if you're someone that is a warehouse worker, a nurse, physician like me, up on your feet all the time, sometimes on really just, unforgiving polished concrete floors. I know a lot of people ask me, what kind of shoe would you be wearing if you're a nurse, if you're a waitress, if you work in a giant Amazon warehouse? I'd say right now, these ones are, creeping up toward the top of that list of shoes that I would be recommending in my office. So love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. If you're trying to pick a pair of these up, if you're going with something else, let me know in the comments down below. And if you do want to see what I'm talking about with the New Balance Rebel V4, if you kind of want to take a comparison look at both of these shoes, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect, rubber, and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.